My name is Carrie, and this is my story. I was brought up in a semi-Christian home in New Jersey. My parents were brought up Catholic, so we would go to church to appease my grandparents, who were also Catholic. We would go on Easter and on Thanksgiving, or Thanksgiving weekend, or Christmas, or for somebody's baptism or christening, but we really never went other than that. When I was 12 or 13 years old, my mother asked me to get confirmed into the Catholic faith. At that point, I decided I didn't really even know what I believed, and didn't even know if I believed in God at all. So I told my mom that, and she told me it was okay for me to just not get confirmed, which angered my entire family. Years went by, and I, went to high school, went to college. All this time not knowing the Lord, all this time having friends, having a typical high school and college life. My husband, Dan, who I called Daniel at the time, was my friend all through those years, and my boyfriend for many of those years, but and he was the only Christian that I knew. And so I just thought, obviously anybody who believes in Christianity must be crazy, because the stories are just so outlandish. This man comes to earth, he dies on a cross, and he is basically risen again in 3 days. It just sounded so crazy to me. These stories of Noah's Ark or Jonah and the whale, I just thought it was so outlandish. I thought, how could he believe in such a story? And but I always looked up to him. I always admired that he had such a strong conviction, strong faith in Jesus. But I just thought, there's no way I could ever really believe in this. Because if I believed in it, I would have to put my intellectual side aside. As the years went on, I went off to college. Dan went off to college. We had separate lives. I basically was that person in school who used to argue with Christians if I met them, and argue the theory of evolution and how Jesus wasn't really a Messiah. And I even wrote a college essay about Jesus being based off of the myth of Prometheus, which is a Greek god. And so I was totally convinced that Jesus was not the Messiah, and that all Christians were crazy. However, when I was in my third year of college, I started babysitting for a family, and this lady named Tracy was the woman I was babysitting for, and she would ask me to go to church with her all the time, and I thought, there's no way she's going to get me to go to church. She brought me to see The Passion of the Christ, which was out at the time, and even though I cried during that movie because I thought it was so brutal, I still did not believe. She would try to get me to read a Bible. She tried every angle, and I said, you're not going to get me to believe any of this. It's absolutely insane. However, God used the most random of things to pursue me. I started reading the book, The Da Vinci Code, which came out at the time, probably in the year 2002 or 2003, and I thought, wow, this religious conspiracy stuff is really interesting. I want to know more. And at the time, Tracy had noticed my interest in these things and used it as an opportunity to buy me this book called The Case for Christ. And it's about a journalist whose wife became a born-again Christian after they've been married for 10 years, and she decided that she was going to follow Christ, and it ruined their marriage, according to him. So he decided to pursue proving to her that Jesus was not the Messiah, using his journalist skills. And so when I read this book, I thought, okay, finally I found somebody who is an intellectual person. That sounds very prideful, but somebody who is an intellectual who went on this journey that I feel somehow compelled to go on. And as I read it, I found out that his name is Lee Strobel. He actually became a Christian by doing the research because he couldn't deny that Jesus was the Messiah. And I found myself by the end of the book believing it too, which was crazy. I still remember at the very end of reading that book when it asks you, it says something like, now it's your turn to think about this decision. It's, it's a life or death decision. And I remember inside my heart there being a tug of war between the old me and the new me. A big part of me said, yes, I want to follow Jesus. And another part of me said, what are you, crazy? This is exactly what you have denied for all these years. If you do this, all your friends are going to think you're insane. You won't have any friends. I had every kind of voice going on in my head about it. But the process was very, very slow. I was really worried that my whole life was going to change. And I was worried that I was being brainwashed. And that's exactly what I didn't want to be. So over the next couple months, God just kept pursuing me. No matter where I turned, no matter where I went, he would say something to me or speak something to me through someone, and I couldn't really deny it any longer. And Dan, who's now my husband, called me, and we talked for hours and hours and hours. And within 3 months, I lived in Georgia. I moved to Georgia, and we got married, and we pursued a life together following Jesus. And as crazy as that sounds, it all really happened within 3 or 4 months. Jesus completely turned my life around. In those years that Dan and I spent apart, where we still remained friends, he had always prayed for my salvation. Even when we were kids and he knew I wasn't a believer, he had prayed for my salvation. I didn't know that. But when we had that conversation and I told him that I was saved, that I believed in Jesus, and that I had become a Christian, he said that he was in complete shock. And that was the only thing that had ever stopped him from pursuing marriage with me, was because he needed a partner who would follow Jesus with him. And that was a big turning point for us, because we could see God's plan working out. And I just want to say to anybody who knows someone who is not a believer, who believes that they're too smart to know Jesus. That's what I thought. I was too smart. Now I realize I was dumb to not know Jesus. But anybody who just refuses to bend to what God's will is for their lives, that there is hope. And that just like Tracy would not give up in speaking to me on behalf of the Lord, you have that impact on people when you preach the gospel to them. It doesn't have to be a huge sermon. It could just be taking someone to church with you, or giving them a book when you know that they're curious, or any little moment that you take advantage of, being led by the Holy Spirit to tell people about Jesus. He'll use it. And everybody has a time that God will reach them, and he uses us to do it.